The obsidian dais of the Cathar Imperium shimmered under the cold, analytical light of the celestial orrery, a holographic sphere of captured starlight that dominated the center of the grand conclave chamber. Around it, enthroned upon seats carved from the fossilized bones of leviathans that once swam in the methane seas of their homeworld, sat the triumvirate and the lesser lords of the concordance. Their carapaces, ranging in hue from volcanic black to the deep purple of a dying star, absorbed the light, leaving their multifaceted eyes to gleam like scattered jewels in the oppressive dimness. Silence, a rare and heavy commodity in this place of power, had reigned for an uncomfortably long duration. It was a silence born not of peace, but of a profound and shared uncertainty that coiled in the chamber's atmosphere like a predator. The subject of this suffocating silence was a single, insignificant vessel that had drifted into their monitored space, a mote of dust against the grandeur of their star-spanning civilization. It was human. The designation, transmitted in a burst of primitive radio waves that their sensors had almost dismissed as background radiation, was the Starglider. A name of almost childish simplicity, a name that carried none of the gravitas of their own void-faring fortresses like the will of Cathar or the sorrow of 1,000 suns. The ship itself was a mockery of starship design. It was small, asymmetrical, and devoid of any discernible weaponry. Its energy signature was so faint, so laughably minuscule, that the initial sensor sentinels had classified it as a derelict, a piece of cosmic flotsam. Yet it moved with purpose, its trajectory a deliberate, unwavering line toward the core of their territory, an act of either supreme arrogance or unfathomable ignorance. High Lord Vorlag, his obsidian carapace etched with the fractal patterns of his lineage, broke the silence. His voice, a low-frequency rumble that vibrated through the very stone of the chamber, was laced with a weary frustration. It sits there, just beyond the veiled nebula. It does nothing. It says nothing. It merely is. This single, pathetic vessel holds the attention of the entire concordance. We have fleets that could atomize it with a stray thought, yet we are paralyzed. He gestured with a three-taloned hand toward the orrery, where a tiny, almost invisible speck of light represented the human ship. The reports from the frontier worlds are bordering on hysteria. They see this inaction as weakness. They see our caution as fear. From a lower throne, Inquisitor Kalen, her carapace the color of bruised twilight, shifted. Her role was to dissect threats, to understand the minds of their enemies, and humanity was the greatest enigma her order had ever faced. Fear is not an inappropriate response, High Lord. Caution is the child of wisdom, and we know nothing of these humans. The data we have gathered from their scattered transmissions, their primitive networks that bleed into the void, is a tapestry of contradictions. They are a species that glorifies war in their fictions, yet they have not expanded beyond their single star system in a manner that suggests conquest. They possess art of sublime beauty and philosophies of profound empathy, yet their history is a litany of self-inflicted atrocities. They are a paradox, a chaotic storm of potential barely contained within fragile flesh. A third voice, sharp and crystalline, cut through the chamber. It belonged to Grand Strategist Zorgan, his polished, silver-hued carapace reflecting the starlight of the orrery with cold precision. Potential is not power, Inquisitor. Chaos is not a strategy. Their vessel is, by every metric we possess, the weakest ship to have ever entered our domain. Its hull is a simple alloy, not the living metal of our dreadnoughts. Its power core emits less energy than one of our civilian transports. Its sensor suite is, by our standards, blind. We have analyzed its communications. They speak of exploration, of making contact. These are the words of children wandering into a forest filled with apex predators. To treat this insignificant craft as a genuine threat is to dishonor the legacy of the Imperium. Vorlag turned his multifaceted eyes upon Zorgan, a slow, deliberate movement that carried immense weight. And yet, strategist, you have not advocated for its destruction. You, who have always preached the doctrine of overwhelming force, of preemptive annihilation. Why the hesitation? What does your cold logic see that the rest of us are missing? Zorgan's posture remained rigid, a monument to martial certainty. But for a fleeting moment, a flicker of something unreadable passed through his crystalline eyes. Because, High Lord, its weakness may be a form of strength we do not yet comprehend. Its trajectory is too perfect, its arrival too coincidental. It has navigated the gravitic tides of the veiled nebula, a region that shears apart our own. Scout vessels with an impossible precision. It avoids our sensor nets not by stealth, but by appearing so insignificant that they are calibrated to ignore it. This is not the action of a lost child. It is the action of a master strategist who understands the terrain better than we do. It is either a trap of unimaginable subtlety, or it is a message. A message? Kalen's voice was soft, yet it commanded attention. What message could be conveyed by sending the most fragile piece of equipment one possesses into the heart of a potential adversary's territory? The grand strategist remained silent, his gaze fixed on the tiny speck of light in the orrery. The implication hung in the air, a chilling counterpoint to his earlier bravado. What if the message was that this, their weakest, most pathetic vessel, was all that was required to face the might of the Cathar Imperium? The thought was so absurd, so profoundly insulting, that it bordered on madness. And it was this touch of madness, this utter deviation from all known rules of engagement and interstellar diplomacy, that held the Concordance in its grip of silent, fascinated horror. The Starglider was not just a ship. It was a philosophical bomb, an existential question delivered to their doorstep. Was it a gesture of peace, an offering of a vulnerable hand in friendship? Or was it the ultimate expression of contempt, a statement that the Cathar were so beneath consideration that a vessel fit only for scrap was sufficient to challenge them? The ambiguity was the true weapon, and it was already proving devastatingly effective, sowing discord and doubt within the very heart of the Imperium before a single shot had been fired. The weakest ship in the human fleet had, without doing anything at all, already launched the most successful first strike in the history of their conflicts. The days that followed deepened the fissure of uncertainty within the Cathar hierarchy. The Starglider remained in its silent vigil, a patient, unassuming star in a sky that was not its own. It made no transmissions, launched no probes, and did not deviate from its position. It simply waited. This unnerving passivity began to fray the nerves of the Concordance. Zorgan's logic, while unsettling, had taken root. The absence of threat was becoming more threatening than any declaration of war. An enemy that announces itself with fire and fury is an enemy that can be understood, met, and defeated. But an entity that presents itself as a fragile enigma invites paranoia. It forces introspection. It turns the mind of the observer into the battlefield. Inquisitor Kalen dedicated her order to a deeper analysis of the fragmented human data they had intercepted over the decades. They pieced together snippets of their history, their art, their science. The picture that emerged was more confounding than ever. They saw a species capable of creating music that could evoke the sorrow of a dying star and literature that explored the deepest questions of existence. They saw philosophies that championed the sanctity of all life, that spoke of universal rights and shared cosmic heritage. But alongside this, they saw evidence of brutal, world-spanning conflicts, of weapons that could poison a planet for millennia, of ideologies that reduced individuals to mere instruments of a collective will. The humans were a species at war with itself, a duality of creation and destruction bound in a single, turbulent form. "They are nascent," Kalen reported to the triumvirate, her voice resonating with a mixture of pity and awe. "They are like a star in the process of formation, a chaotic swirl of incandescent gas and crushing gravity that has not yet found its equilibrium. They have the potential to become a radiant sun, a source of light and life for the galaxy, or they could collapse into a black hole, a void that consumes all that comes near. This ship, this Starglider, may not be a weapon or a messenger. It may be a test, not of our strength but of our character." High Lord Vorlag considered her words, his ancient mind weighing them against the pragmatic demands of an empire. "A test of our character? Inquisitor, we are the Cathar. Our character was forged in the fires of 1,000 wars. We are survivors. We are predators. It is the nature of the universe. The strong consume the weak. That is the only law that has ever mattered." "Is it?" Kalen countered, her boldness surprising even herself. "We have never encountered a species that so openly displays its vulnerability. Every race we have conquered or assimilated has met us with shields and weapons, with defiance and aggression. They have played the game by the rules we understand. The humans do not. They have sent us a poem, a philosophical riddle, and we are trying to answer it with a sword. Perhaps the correct answer is to put the sword down." Grand strategist Zorgan, ever the pragmatist, scoffed. The sound was like grinding stone, a beautiful senti. Meant Inquisitor, but sentiment does not defend an empire. This poem is positioned at a strategic chokepoint, a nexus of our primary trade and military routes. Its position is not that of a diplomat, but of an artillery piece waiting for its targeting data. Its passivity could be a tactic. It could be scanning us, learning our patrol patterns, our response times, our command and control frequencies. Its weakness could be the most brilliant camouflage ever devised. He turned to the orrery, his silver carapace seeming to harden. "I have drafted a plan, a single surgical strike. A squadron of our stealth destroyers emerging from hyperspace at point-blank range. The vessel would be vaporized before its crew could even register the attack. No transmissions, no debris. The enigma would be solved, and the threat, real or imagined, would be neutralized. It is a clean, logical solution." Vorlag felt the familiar pull of Zorgan's cold, hard logic. It was the logic that had built their empire. It was decisive, it was safe. But Kalen's words lingered, a test of character. The duality of the humans, the creators, and the destroyers. To destroy the ship would be to prove their own nature as the latter. It would be an admission that their only response to a question was violence. For the first time in his long life, the High Lord felt a flicker of doubt, a questioning of the fundamental principles that had guided his civilization. What if this was the moment that defined the future of the Cathar, not as conquerors, but as something more? The debate raged for cycles. The fleets of the Imperium, a silent, glittering host of warships, remained on high alert, their weapon ports charged, their crews waiting for the order that would either plunge them into war or stand them down. The tension was a palpable thing, a pressure that could be felt on every world, in every city of the Concordance. The fate of two species, one ancient and powerful, the other young and enigmatic, rested on the perception of a single, small ship that drifted, silent and alone in the cold darkness of space. And on that ship the humans waited their own purpose, their own strategy, still a perfect and terrifying mystery. The silence from the Starglider was no longer just an absence of communication. It had become a mirror, forcing the Cathar to gaze into it and confront the reflection of their own souls. The decision, when it came, was not born of consensus, but of exhaustion. The endless debate had created fractures within the triumvirate, and the inaction was eroding the Imperium's authority on the frontier worlds. High Lord Vorlag, swayed by the unnerving possibility that Zorgan's fears and Kalen's hopes might both be true, chose a middle path, a course of action that satisfied no one completely, but prevented the immediate slide into either appeasement or annihilation. He would not destroy the human vessel, but he would not allow it to remain an unchallenged mystery. He sanctioned a direct, formal contact. A single Cathar dreadnought, the voice of certainty, would approach the Starglider. It would be a vessel of overwhelming power, a clear demonstration of their technological and martial superiority. Its purpose was not to threaten, but to intimidate, to force the humans to reveal their intentions from a position of undeniable inferiority. As the voice of certainty disengaged from its hyperspace anchor, the sheer scale of the Cathar warship was designed to inspire awe and terror. It was a city-sized behemoth of living metal, its surface a shifting, fractal landscape of weapon emplacements, sensor arrays, and energy conduits that pulsed with a malevolent, crimson light. It eclipsed the local star, casting the small, unassuming Starglider into its monstrous shadow. The message was clear, written in the language of power that the Cathar believed was universal. "We are Titans. You are insects. Acknowledge this truth and we may yet spare you." On the bridge of the dreadnought, Captain Valerius, a veteran of countless campaigns, watched the human ship on the main view screen. It looked like a child's lost toy against the backdrop of his vessel's colossal hull. He felt a pang of something almost like pity. "Open a channel," Valerius commanded, his voice a guttural rasp. "Standard diplomatic frequency, maximum power, let there be no doubt they can hear us." The communication officer, his talons dancing over a console of glowing crystal, complied. A moment of static, and then the channel was open. A soft chime, a sound utterly alien to the harsh, resonant tones of Cathar technology, echoed across the bridge. It was a sound of calm, of serenity. And then a voice spoke. It was human. The language was not their own, but a flawless, unaccented translation into the High Cathar dialect, a feat of linguistic processing that was, in itself, startling. The voice was calm, measured, and devoid of any discernible fear or aggression. "This is Captain Eva Rosto, Va of the United Terran Confederation vessel Starglider. We have been awaiting your arrival. We greet you in peace." The simplicity of the statement, the utter lack of deference or alarm, sent a ripple of unease through the Cathar bridge crew. They had expected fear, confusion, perhaps even a desperate plea. They had not expected politeness. Captain Valerius narrowed his multifaceted eyes. This was a performance, a carefully calculated display of false confidence. "Human," Valerius's voice boomed across the channel, amplified and distorted to sound as menacing as possible. "You have violated the sovereign territory of the Cathar Imperium. Your vessel is unarmed, unshielded, and an affront to the might of our fleets. By our laws, we have every right to extinguish you. State your purpose or be erased. There was a pause, but it was not a pause of hesitation. It felt thoughtful. Then Captain Rostova's voice returned, as serene as before. Our purpose is to understand. We have observed your civilization from a distance for some time. We have seen your strength, your discipline, your artistry in the construction of worlds. We have also seen your fear. We have come to offer a new perspective. Valerius felt a surge of indignation. Fear? We are the Cathar. We do not know the meaning of the word. We are the apex of this galactic arm. It is others who fear us. Is it? The human voice replied, a gentle, probing question that seemed to bypass the captain's authority and speak directly to the silent doubts of his crew. An apex predator does not feel the need to demonstrate its strength to a creature it does not perceive as a threat. Yet you have approached us with a warship of immense power. You speak of erasure and violation. These are the words of a species that fears the unknown. You fear that which you do not understand, and you do not understand us. That is why we are here. The audacity of it was breathtaking. A being in a fragile metal can, facing a weapon that could crack a continent, was psychoanalyzing the Cathar Imperium. It was an inversion of the power dynamic so profound that it left Valerius momentarily speechless. He glanced at his tactical officer, who simply stared at his console, his carapace betraying a subtle tremor. The humans were not playing by the rules. They were not even acknowledging that a game was being played. We are not here to negotiate, Valerius finally managed to say, his voice strained. We are here to receive your unconditional surrender and an explanation for your intrusion. There is nothing to surrender, Captain, Rostova replied. We are not your enemy, and our intrusion, as you call it, is an invitation. We invite you to see beyond the lens of conflict, to see that strength is not always measured in firepower. The Starglider is, as your sensors have no doubt correctly surmised, the weakest ship in our exploratory fleet. It has no weapons. Its shields can barely repel micrometeoroids. Its engines are designed for endurance, not speed. We sent it for a very specific reason. The bridge of the voice of certainty was utterly silent. Every member of the crew was listening, captivated. This was the answer to the riddle that had paralyzed the Concordance for weeks. We sent the weakest, the human voice continued, its calm tone now carrying an immense weight, because true strength, the only strength that endures, is the courage to be vulnerable. It is the confidence to approach another not with a clenched fist but with an open hand. To show you that we are not a threat, we sent a vessel that could not be a threat. We did this to prove that our intentions are genuine. This ship, in its profound and deliberate weakness, is the ultimate expression of our desire for peace. It is the most powerful diplomatic statement we could possibly make. A stunned silence followed the transmission. The Cathar had been prepared for a fight, for a negotiation, for a trick. They were not prepared for a philosophical lesson. They were not prepared for the possibility that the humans operated on a level of strategic thinking that weaponized concepts like trust and vulnerability. The idea was so alien, so utterly contrary to the Cathar ethos of dominance, that it felt like a blow from an invisible weapon. Grand strategist Zorgan's theory had been both right and wrong. The ship was a message, but the message was not one of contempt. It was one of a deeply unsettling, almost frightening form of sincerity. Then something happened that solidified the growing sense of dread and awe on the Cathar bridge. A new energy reading flared from the Starglider. It was not a weapon charging. It was not a shield activating. It was something else entirely, a complex, multi-layered energy field that bloomed from the small vessel like the petals of a metallic flower. The tactical officer gasped, his talons frozen over his console. Captain, I don't understand these readings. The energy output is still negligible, but the complexity, it's a resonance cascade, a perfectly stable quantum field. It's not a power source, it's an instrument. Before Valerius could demand a clarification, Captain Rostova's voice returned, though this time it seemed to come not just from the communications speakers, but from the very air around them, a subtle resonance that vibrated deep within their carapaces. Now that we have your attention, she said, her voice still calm but now imbued with an undeniable authority, let us show you what we came here to share. Please observe. The view screen, which had been dominated by the image of the small, solitary ship, suddenly shifted. The stars behind the Starglider began to warp, to distort. The fabric of spacetime itself seemed to be bending around the human vessel, not in the violent, tearing manner of a Cathar hyperspace drive, but in a smooth, elegant, and impossibly controlled fashion. The Starglider, the weakest ship in the fleet, was not just sitting in space. It was holding it, shaping it, tuning it like a master musician tunes a complex instrument. The Cathar had sent a dreadnought to intimidate a child's toy, only to discover that the toy was, in fact, the key to unlocking the fundamental architecture of the universe. The true reveal had begun, and the foundations of the Cathar Imperium's understanding of power were about to be shattered. The display of controlled space-time manipulation sent a shockwave of disbelief through the Cathar command structure. On the bridge of the voice of certainty, Captain Valerius could only stare, his warrior's mind struggling to process what his senses were telling him. The energy field emanating from the Starglider was not just bending light, it was reshaping reality on a localized level with a finesse that was godlike. The Cathar's own method of faster-than-light travel was a brutal, inefficient process of punching a hole into a different dimension and hoping the exit point was roughly where they intended. It was the equivalent of using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. The humans, it now appeared, were performing microsurgery on the universe with a scalpel made of pure mathematics. High Lord Vorlag, observing the events from the Grand Conclave chamber, felt a cold dread seep into his ancient bones. He watched as the stars around the human vessel swirled into new, impossible constellations. The Starglider was not moving, yet it was showing them images from across the galaxy, projecting them onto the canvas of spacetime itself. They saw the birth of a star in a distant nebula, the silent dance of crystalline life forms in the atmosphere of a gas giant, the ruins of a civilization that had perished eons before their own had even learned to harness fire. The Starglider wasn't just a ship. It was a window, an observatory with a view of infinity. "What is this?" Vorlag's voice was a low rumble of disbelief. "What are they doing?" Inquisitor Kalen stepped forward, her multifaceted eyes wide with a terrifying, ecstatic understanding. "They are not doing anything to us, High Lord. They are showing us. They are sharing knowledge. This is their equivalent of an open library. The energy readings, the resonance cascade, it's not a weapon. It is a device for observing and manipulating the quantum foam, the very substrate of reality. They can see not just across space, but potentially across time. Their weakest ship is not a warship. It is an instrument of pure science, a tool of such profound sophistication that we mistook its purpose entirely because we could not even conceive of it." Grand Strategist Zorgan stood as if turned to stone, his silver carapace reflecting the impossible vistas being painted on the orrery. His mind, which had always operated on the principles of mass, velocity, and energy, was failing to find a foothold. The humans had not sent a ship with weak weapons. They had sent a ship for which the very concept of conventional weaponry was obsolete. Why build a cannon to destroy a city when you can understand the fundamental forces that hold that city's atoms together? Why conquer a planet when you can witness the birth and death of galaxies from a single, stationary point in space? The voice of Captain Rostova returned, a calm island in the storm of Cathar confusion. "For generations, your people have looked to the stars and seen only territory to be conquered, resources to be claimed, and threats to be neutralized. You have built an empire on the foundation of fear, the fear of scarcity, the fear of the other, the fear of the unknown. We offer you a different path. The universe is not a dark forest filled with predators. It is a library filled with stories. The weakness of this vessel is that it cannot fight. Its strength is that it can read." On the view screen aboard the Voice of Certainty, the stellar ballet ceased. The view returned to the simple, unassuming Starglider, floating peacefully in the shadow of the Cathar dreadnought. The contrast was now even more stark, but the meaning had been inverted. The massive, threatening warship suddenly seemed crude, primitive, a relic of a bygone era of thought. The small, fragile science vessel felt ancient, wise, and infinitely powerful. Captain Valerius finally found his voice, though it was hollowed out, stripped of its former arrogance. You could have destroyed us. If you can manipulate spacetime with such ease, you could have unmade my ship, my crew, with a thought." "The thought would never occur to us," Rostova replied, and the sincerity in her voice was absolute. "To destroy a thing is to admit you have failed to understand it. We did not come here to destroy. We came here to teach. We have studied your biology, your history. The Cathar are a species of immense potential, but you are trapped in a cycle of fear and aggression that will eventually lead to your stagnation or your self-destruction. You have reached the limits of what can be achieved through conquest. The next stage of your evolution is not outward, but inward. It is the evolution of consciousness." This was the great reveal. The humans were not conquerors. They were not even explorers in the traditional sense. They were something else, a species that had transcended the primal urge for dominance and had dedicated itself to the pursuit of knowledge, not as a means to an end, but as the end itself. Their technology was not a weapon, but a consequence of their philosophy. They were not powerful because they had built advanced tools. They had built advanced tools because their understanding of the universe was so profound that such things were the natural result. High Lord Vorlag sank back into his throne, the weight of ages pressing down on him. He saw the path of his people stretching back through time, a long, bloody road paved with the bones of their enemies. They had always believed it was the only road. Now the humans were showing them a new one, a path that led not to a throne built on skulls, but to the quiet, infinite expanse of the library of the cosmos. Why? Vorlag broadcast the single word from the conclave chamber, his voice raw with a mix of suspicion and a desperate, burgeoning hope. Why share this with us? What do you gain? Captain Rostova's answer was the final, devastating blow to the Cathar worldview. Gain? The concept is limited. When one adds a new book to a library, does the library gain? Or does the universe of knowledge simply become more complete? You are a part of that universe. Your story, your perspective is unique. To allow it to be extinguished through self-inflicted violence would be a loss for all of existence. We do not seek to gain from you. We seek to have you join us, to learn alongside us. To add your voice to the cosmic chorus. The offer was so profound, so utterly altruistic, that it broke through millennia of Cathar conditioning. It was an invitation to lay down their arms not in surrender, but in enlightenment, to abandon the path of the warrior for the path of the scholar. For the first time, the leaders of the Cathar Imperium did not see a potential enemy or a potential subject in the stars. They saw a potential peer, a teacher. The weakest ship in the human fleet had not defeated them with force, but had conquered them with an idea. The war for the soul of the Cathar was over, and it had been won without a single shot fired. The initial period of contact was one of profound and unsettling transformation for the Cathar Imperium. The Starglider remained in its position, a silent tutor, while the voice of certainty became its first and most important pupil. Captain Valerius, once a proud warrior of the Imperium, found himself in the humbling position of a student, his bridge crew working alongside human specialists who were transported aboard via a shimmering, non-physical projection technology that made Cathar transporters look like catapults. The humans shared their knowledge freely, patiently explaining the principles of space-time resonance, of quantum entanglement communication, of the very fabric of reality that they had learned to read like a book. The greatest shock for the Cathar was the nature of the humans themselves. They were not gods, nor were they the coldly logical, emotionless beings their advanced technology might have suggested. They were individuals, filled with curiosity, empathy, and a quiet, unshakable ethical core. They answered every question, no matter how naive or aggressive, with patience and a genuine desire to be understood. They showed the Cathar their art, their music, their philosophies, the chaotic, contradictory, and beautiful tapestry of their inner lives. The Cathar, a species that had always prized uniformity and rigid discipline, were mesmerized by the human celebration of individuality and diversity. In the Grand Conclave Chamber, High Lord Vorlag and the Triumvirate spent countless cycles in commune. Ication with Captain Rostova. They learned that humanity had faced its own crucible, a period of near self-annihilation that had forced them to confront the very nature of their being. They had emerged from that fire not with a desire to impose their will upon the galaxy, but with a sacred vow to prevent other species from making the same mistakes. Their fleet was not a military force, but a vast, mobile university, a network of vessels like the Starglider dedicated to finding and nurturing nascent galactic intelligence. The concept of non-interference was anathema to them. They believed that the highest moral calling was to interfere, but to do so with wisdom, compassion, and the sole intention of uplifting, not conquering. A fragile but genuine trust began to form. The Cathar fleets were stood down from their high alert. Their best scientists and philosophers were brought to engage with the humans, and a new era of intellectual and cultural exchange began. The Cathar, with their disciplined minds and long history, proved to be adept students. They began to see the universe not as a source of threats, but as a source of wonder. Their society, once rigid and militaristic, began to show the first signs of a renaissance, a flowering of art and science that had long been suppressed in the name of imperial security. It was during one of these exchanges, with Vorlag and Rostova deep in a philosophical discussion about the nature of consciousness, that the larger twist, the true purpose of the human presence was finally revealed. It began not with a grand announcement, but with a quiet, persistent signal that the Starglider's advanced sensors detected emanating from the vast, empty void between galaxies. It was a signal that the Cathar, with their more limited technology, had never been able to perceive. "We have been tracking it for centuries," Captain Rostova explained, her projected image in the conclave chamber showing a complex waveform analysis on the holographic orrery. "It is not a natural phenomenon, it is artificial, structured, a message." Vorlag leaned forward, his ancient carapace creaking. "A message, from whom the intergalactic void is empty, lifeless." "It is not empty," Rostova replied, her calm voice taking on a new layer of gravity. "And this is why we are truly here. It is why we seek out species like yours, species with the strength and the will to evolve. The message is a warning, and it is a summons." She manipulated the controls, and the waveform was translated into a visual pattern, a language of pure mathematics and geometry that transcended species. It told a story of a cycle that was far older than either the human or Cathar civilizations. It spoke of a form of consciousness that existed on a scale they could barely comprehend, that periodically swept through galaxies like a fire, harvesting advanced civilizations and reducing them to cosmic dust. The ruins the Starglider had shown them earlier were not the victims of their own folly. They were the victims of this cyclical, predatory force. The signal was a beacon, a desperate message left by a coalition of ancient species from a previous cycle, a warning to those who would come after. It was a call to arms, an instruction manual for survival. "This force, this harvester, is awakening," Rostova stated, her words falling like stones into the silent chamber. "Its preliminary patterns are already being detected at the galactic rim. That is the true threat. Not each other, not the petty squabbles over territory and resources, but a force of nature that views entire civilizations as nothing more than a crop to be reaped." The revelation was staggering, recontextualizing everything. The humans were not just teachers, they were recruiters. Their mission was not just to enlighten, but to unite. They were trying to build an alliance, a galactic coalition of species strong enough and wise enough to stand against the coming storm. The Cathar, with their martial history, their discipline, and their vast industrial capacity, were not just another species to be saved. They were a crucial piece of the puzzle, a potential front line in a war for the survival of all sentient life in the galaxy. "Our perceived weakness, the vulnerability of the Starglider, was also a filter," Rostova admitted. "Any species that would destroy such a vessel on sight that would respond to our offer of peace with reflexive violence would be deemed unready. They would be a liability in the fight to come. But you, High Lord Vorlag, you hesitated. You chose to ask why. In that moment of hesitation, in that flicker of curiosity over conquest, you proved that the Cathar were ready to hear the truth." Vorlag looked at the orrery, at the representation of their galaxy, and for the first time, he saw it not as a collection of Cathar territories and alien domains, but as a single, fragile island of life in an ocean of unimaginable darkness. He oaked at the human captain, her form a shimmering projection of light, and saw not an alien but a partner. The fear of the unknown that had gripped his people for so long was finally replaced by a far greater and far more noble fear, the fear of extinction and the burning resolve to prevent it. "What must we do?" Vorlag asked. The question was not that of a high lord of an empire, but of a soldier receiving his orders. The alliance was forged not in a treaty of conquest, but in a pact of mutual survival. The Cathar began the monumental task of retooling their vast war machine, transforming their fleets from instruments of oppression into a shield for the galaxy. Their shipyards, once dedicated to building dreadnoughts, began working with human engineers to construct new vessels, ships that blended the Cathar's mastery of materials and energy with the humans' profound understanding of spacetime and reality itself. The Voice of Certainty became the flagship of a new, united fleet, its name taking on a new, more profound meaning. In the final scene, High Lord Vorlag stood on the bridge of his transformed dreadnought, side by side with the projected form of Captain Eva Rostova. Around them, a vast armada of ships, a seamless blend of human and Cathar design assembled in the void. They were no longer two separate fleets, but a single, unified force, a testament to the alliance born from a single, weak vessel. They were pointed toward the galactic rim, toward the encroaching darkness from which the ancient warning emanated. Vorlag gazed at the starfield ahead, a sea of infinite possibility and now infinite peril. He thought of the long history of his people, the wars, the conquests, the fear. It all seemed so small now, so short-sighted. The humans had not come to conquer the Cathar Imperium. They had come to save it from itself, so that it might join them in saving everything else. The weakest ship had indeed become the ultimate weapon, not a weapon of destruction, but a weapon of creation. It had forged an alliance, it had built a bridge between two vastly different cultures, and it had ignited a hope that could now stand against the coming night. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his being, but it was no longer the paralytic fear of the unknown. It was the energizing fear of a warrior facing a worthy foe, a protector standing before that which he was sworn to defend. The future was uncertain, the enemy was godlike, but for the first time in their long and storied history, the Cathar were not alone. And in that unity, they had found a strength greater than any they had ever known.